I was born in Tontitown, Arkansas, March 18th, 1929. My parents was Joseph Taldo and Doris Benotto. See, let me think about my father first, because I was young when he died. He passed away when I was about not quite 6 years old. And they have a long name for it, but it was kind of like a flu. And they took him to the Fayetteville Hospital, and he died there. And my mother was born in Tontitown, Doris Taldo, and she was Doris Benotto, and she was born there. Well, my grandparents, I remember, now my father's parents, she died before I was born. And my grandfather Taldo, when they built the house currently, they built a room for her and him. And so they lived there for, I don't know how many years, but probably not too many. But he was a nice man. I didn't know her at all. But he would treat us kids, he would bring us good candy, and he'd throw it on the floor. And he'd make us all get down and grab a hold of it. And that's, my memory there was next when he was in a coffin, and they had his silver dollars on his eyes. And I thought that was awful queer. And like I said, I was so young that I didn't know really what I was doing. But they always brought the corpse home. And they always had a rosary service for him at the house. And of course, then the funeral was at the church. I can't say enough of good about my mother. When my father died, she was carrying her last child, my brother Joe. And he died, he was born in July. And July the 3rd, this was about 3 months after my daddy had died. And so my mother, there were different ones that asked if she couldn't give them some children of our, since she said absolutely not. She said, "The Lord gives me health, I'll raise them all." And she did, but she also took care, when the baby was born, then they thought she was going to die. She was going through trauma, you know. But I remember my aunt telling her, says, "You got to kick out of this because you got a big family to take care of." And so she did. She survived and supported us. My daddy's brother, he had been in an accident when he was a young boy, about 12 years old, and had a leg shot off. And he never married, but he moved to St. Louis. He got him a job as a cashier in a big restaurant. He was a very, very intelligent man. So he decided to come home. He talked about with my mother, and she gave him the bedroom upstairs and an office downstairs, which was the grandparents' bedroom. And he had an office there, and my mother let him go ahead and take care of the farm, and he did that. And she raised us all, and he stayed there. If you want to know anything about Uncle Dick, I can tell that too. My sister Katie is the oldest, and then I have Raymond, and then Freddie, and then Beatrice. And the family was growing, so this is when my daddy decided to build a home. She was expecting me at the time. So they moved in, and I was born, I guess, 3 years. The house was probably built in 27, I don't know for sure, because I was born there, and after my daddy had passed away. And then my sister, just younger than me, was Ida Brady. And she and Sarah Russell, and then my baby brother was born after Daddy died. And he turned out to be a very spoiled young man. He really was. And everybody teased him, but he was full of mischief. And meanwhile, my uncle was living there, and he was kind of a father figure to him. He loved him very much. So he had that, and we always had to respect my uncle. Mother told us, she says, "Now be careful, don't give him any trouble, and don't fuss around him or anything like this," because he never had married, and he didn't have children, of course. But anyway, he did spoil my brother. He was spoiled by all the people in Tontitown, actually. My uncle, okay, he was about 12 years old. He said it's someplace in Oklahoma where they were on a hunting trip, and he got his leg shot off. And they didn't know who done it, but somebody said they knew who done it, but would never release it. But it was an accident. And so they had to cut off his leg, and cut it off till way up high. And he was actually self-educated. He was a very intelligent man. He was the town's recorder, and he kept going to school. Nuns finally told him they had school through the 9th grade, and they told him that he knew more than they did. But he was a barber. He was a town barber. I think he charged either about a nickel for a haircut, and so that wasn't much, but it helped him a little bit. And he took care of the farm. He had one leg, but he could tie vines, and he could spray and stuff like that. We all called him Dick, Uncle Dick. He was Uncle Dick, and he worked. He was a politician too. He was on the school board, and he did things for people. He wrote letters. People, lawyers including, would come to him, and people running in politics. I remember Fulbright came one day and talked to him outside, was wanting his votes, because he had a pull in Tontitown like Richard Artemani did. And like I said, he even wrote letters of proposals. So he was really had his office. He had a library like books of every kind, encyclopedias on agriculture and everything. And he started the winery. The name of it was Dixie Pride, and it was Bounded Winery number 40. And he had to have that posted on the tree there. And of course he was handicapped. He had this sold from the house. And people coming by knew about his wine or thought it was very good. But he had to use our basement. We had a big basement. And he used that to store the wine in and everything. And we had to help with sterilizing bottles and making the seals and everything that they had to have. And all we could do to help him, we helped him do that. But he was on, like I say, he was on the school board and other things. I don't remember everything. Anyway, he was the town, what did I say it was? Recorder. He was the town recorder. Well, we couldn't do much there except to help him bottle it, and bottle the wine and stuff, and put the labels on, and things like that. And people would come by that knew knew about him, and they'd come by, and he was like I said, he was self-educated, and he had encyclopedias of every kind, and he took care of the vineyards and the house payments on the house, and Mother did the cooking and everything like this. And later, my mother built chicken houses to make a living. Well, we're talking about Uncle Dick now, and he was handicapped because of losing a leg, so it was impossible for him to get many jobs, and so he decided to start a winery. And this winery, he put the name of Dixie Pride and Bounded Winery number 40. And we picked grapes. He would always do the tying and the spraying and stuff like that, but he couldn't plow. But anyway, he'd have to get help to grind the grapes up. He had a thing to grind all the grapes up and throw them in a big tina. We called them a tina. And I don't know, I guess that's Italian for a big barrel or something. But great big old round thing. You threw them all in there, and you let them ferment until they were ready to be pressed. And we had a press where they put the grapes in this press, and it pressed out all the juice. And the other ones was called pummies. And this was when the wine was ready. The grapes was ready to be bottled and everything. And when that wasn't ready there, they had to let it ferment and everything like that. But I'm talking about from the beginning to the end of it. And the only help he ever had was what we could give him. And that was to get bottles and things like that ready for him. And we would do that, and he took care of the sales on it and getting rid of everything. So that was his project, and raising the family, helping Mother around the farm. Mother raised chicken houses and things to raise money. I mean, we picked grapes. Oh, we picked grapes. We picked strawberries, and we went to neighbors down there. They'd come and pick us up to go pick strawberries. They would live around Elm Springs, and they'd take us down there. We'd pick strawberries, and we'd pick tomatoes. That's the one thing Mother didn't want us to do. She wouldn't let us go pick tomatoes because they were too heavy. So Cookie Morrison, they called him, he had a tomato patch. He promised Mother that he wouldn't let us carry them, that he just pick them and put them in the boxes, in barrels, not barrels, but carriers of some kind, and he'd load them for us. So we went down and we did that, and we cut spinach, and make some money. And Mother would tell us if you pick strawberries for people, and it said, I was little and young, and I tried to make enough that Cap Tiller come to town. And he had a movie. They were all westerns, things like that. And Mother would say, well, you make enough money, you can go to the movie tonight. So it took about 12 baskets, 12 cents to go. And it took me all day to pick 12 baskets of strawberries. But if you want to go to a movie, you did that. So and Mother also, anytime we worked in the summertime, later on I worked in a canning factory, and I was underage, but I had to get a child labor deal on that, and we'd have to pack them in the cans to get them ready, label them one thing and another. In wintertime, we did that in Tontitown. Wintertime, there was a canning factory in Elm Springs, and they would come and get us and take us. They would had to label the cans, and of course they had everything sorted where we would label. They'd take us sometimes to Fayetteville. They had a warehouse in Fayetteville, and we'd label that. We'd make money that way, and any money we made, it was our money. But she would take us to town and let us pick out our material for dresses. She'd sew them, or she'd let us buy. I needed a coat one year. She said, "What would you like? A coat?" And I said, "Yes, I sure would." So she'd take us to town, let us pick out what we wanted. We had our own money. So that helped her, that too. When we had our own money, she saw to it that we spent it on ourselves. Oh my, chores. I hated milking. I guess that was the one thing I hated, milking. One cow for me to milk. And so my sister, just older than me, we always had to do chores like the dinner dishes. When of course we called it supper. Well, our supper dishes, one of us would wash them and the other one would dry them. And so Beatrice would say, well, she says, I'll milk your cow if you do the washing and drying of my dishes. So initially I did. And when you do the dishes, you also had to clean the kitchen floor. And you had to sweep it out and everything. So I would, to get out of milking one cow, I did all the dinner dishes, and supper dishes rather, and sweep the floor and clean up everything, wash and dry. And not only that, we had a strainer to strain the milk, and had pads in it. And she'd do that, but she'd make me wash them, wash everything, sterilize the strainer and things like that, milk buckets and things like that. So she had it pretty easy. But I didn't, but I hated to milk, so I did anything to keep from milking. Oh, my washings, my mother we had big washings, and 12 sheets at a time, and we'd change them every week. And she had about 6 lines out there, but we had our garden fenced off, and they had these fences with, to keep cattle, things out. And Mother would let us, we never did wash, Mother would heat the water outside in a big kettle, and she'd wash on the north side of the house, and Katie would help her do that. But we would hang out the socks and handkerchiefs and things like that over in the fence because they didn't they take up too much line. So we would do that, and so help over that way. But we never did have to. Then Mother when electricity came through Tontitown, our house when it was built was wired for electricity. And so, and it was probably built in 27. I was born in 29, and I was there. There about 2 years difference in our ages, but Mother had lost a baby between us, so there was 3 between my sister and I, older sister. But we would, like I said, we had to do our chores. I guess my earliest memories was probably going to school. We went to school, we went to high primer and low primer, and then we started first grade. So at that time, we didn't go to high school. I mean, some of them didn't, but by the time I got old enough to go, they were taught to Spindle. We all went to Spindle High School. I went to 10th grade there, 10th, 11th, and 12th. But like I said, we don't, in the school, the nuns would, every year, they'd have Christmas programs and things, and they'd always have a little dance, music and a dance, and I was always in that, among other kids too. And we had a play. We studied for a play, and parents would come to listen to that in school, and they'd show everything. Oh, day of school, it was pretty good. One thing, the nuns kind of sympathized with us because we had lost our father. And so we had it pretty easy for a while there with the nuns, but we had one nun, she was pretty strict. And when we missed a spelling, one spelling word, we'd have to put our hands out like this, and clap with the ruler. Then we'd turn them around and clap with the ruler. I never did like that, teacher. But I didn't. You learn to spell. I'll tell you one thing, you sure do. There was a Bodino store and Richard Artemani's store. Richard and B. Artemani had a grocery store there, and Mr. Millar, Frank Bodino had built it. And Mr. Millar, I think, was his brother-in-law, and he run it. And he had been educated in medicine, one thing and another, and mother needed anything for us. I burnt myself real bad on just being ornery, and she took me down there and let him look at it, and he had ungentine or something like that he told her to put on my burn, and but Mr. Millar had also some clothing in there, and he was he was a church organist, and when somebody died, he'd toll the bells. So many for a woman and so many for a man. And if you heard the bells tolled, church bell tolled, you know somebody had died. And he did that, I guess, till he died. But he died, he lived different than anybody else. He had it been kind of like an old box-like deal that he lived downstairs. They had an upstairs there, and he lived down there, and he'd sleep in that. That's how he slept. And anybody need medicine, he could tell you what to get. He kind of studied, I think, on medicines and things. He kept a supply of things you could buy. There was another grocery store, Emma Mersani, Claude and Emma Mersani. They had it on the highway. The Tontitown Mercantile was where it was, and then just down a little bit from them was Claude Mersani's. And we usually traded at either Millar's or Tontitown Mercantile because it was the closest. We very seldom went down to other places unless they didn't have it. And I think Mother run a charge account there too. Well, there was small cafes, but the best one I can remember, and I was pretty grown, that was the Venetian Inn. Gasparotto started it. His last name was Gasparotto, and he started the Venetian Inn. And that was a nice restaurant to go to and good food. And when he had gotten rid of it and got, I think the next one was Letterman's Granada. She was a Granada, and she and her husband run it then for years, and then gone on, still running, I think. Family, nieces and nephews and things like this. We didn't eat out. We ate. Mother always cooked. In high school, there were just 3 of us, but in grade school then we had. Let's see. Well, we had nice. It was Jimmy Marito, Leon Zupo, Lawrence McClone, and Junior Verrocchi, if I named him. But they were always Paul Mastery. There's just a lot of them. And one day I was chewing gum, and they always want gum, you know. So I decided I'd give them some chiclets. Maybe chiclets. Well, instead of giving them chiclets, I'd give them. It was something to make their bowels move. So they went, give me some of your chiclets. Give me some of your chiclets. So I put them in a chiclet box, and a little chiclet. You know what chiclets are? Well, they're gum, and so I gave them that, and I was telling that to my aunt, and she said, "That's why Junior come home with the runs." She said, and I said, "Well, that stopped them from asking me for my gum." They never did ask me for gum anymore. I gave them to him and Paul Mastery. I guess they took them. Of course, we lived close to the church. And we went to church every Sunday. We never missed a Sunday. We just took it for granted like you eat a dinner. I mean, we went to church, and I made my first communion the year that Daddy died. They had me, when we have our first communion, they always crown the Blessed Mother, put a crown of flowers on her. And they had me to do that, put that flowers on her, and Daddy was homesick. And mother had to doctor him and take care of him then. And she told me, she says, she says, you go on up there. She says, you look for Nono, my grandfather. And when you get up there, you turn around and look at him and smile. And so I did, and he winked at me. But Father Darlington, he was a great priest, a wonderful priest. And he was very good at helping people, poor people. Stuff like bringing them groceries or something. And I know when mother was carrying Joe, when Daddy died, carrying her baby, and she was out drawing water down in the field there, not field, in the barnyard for the cattle. And he come by, and I can remember just him saying, just as plain, he said, well, what are you doing, Dora? Craps, get away from there, I'll do that. And so, of course, mother was used to doing that. And so he was good to the family. He'd come by and see if he could be any help or anything like that. And another family in Tontitown was they had, I don't know what kind of illness it was, but it was something that was contagious, and they weren't allowed to communicate for a while. And he'd go to them, even bring them food and stuff like that. In fact, he told mother how to make a gravy with hamburger meat. And he said, now Dora, he said, this will feed a family big. Because we never lacked for food, but he showed us how to do, mother how to do that, and we just loved it. What we do for fun? Well, we had house parties. And as I got big, we had house parties. We'd go to different people's houses, but we didn't go in the house. We played games outside and everything. Dropped the handkerchief, and one thing, guess who this is, blind man bluff, and she probably wouldn't have any idea what we're talking about, but we would have a lot of house parties, and we'd go to the creek. We call it creek. We didn't have any transportation, but mother would see to it that we went, and we'd have picnics, little picnics, and we had a Nickelodeon in the school basement, and so we would all get together when bad weather. And we'd go down there, and they had a Nickelodeon, and they'd play it, and we would dance. And one thing and another, we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun growing up. Yes, they had parties, just like Mother and Daddy had parties, and they'd get together. We had a big back porch, and a lot of times they'd have, even later on, they'd have the Taldo brothers, and mostly had musical instruments. And they'd play those, and they'd have dances, but they had house parties too. And mother would, I know she fixed stuff for them one time, and had quilting parties, the women. They'd quilt at different homes, whoever had a quilt to be quilted. And they'd get together and quilt them, and mother would fix refreshments for them. And one time she fixed some refreshments. She said, I'm gonna try something different. So she got some crackers, regular soda crackers, and got powdered sugar, and they had coloring for them. And she got those crackers, and she'd put the powdered sugar filling in them. So they'd eat 2 pounds of crackers. They just loved them. It was something different, rather than cookies or a piece of cake or something like that. But they always had, everybody helped everybody when they had a quilting deal. And the adults, what they'd do a lot of time at Halloween, they'd dress up, and they'd go to people's house and make you guess who they were. And sometimes you could, and sometimes you didn't. They'd put on a little show, they'd dance around, and you'd have to guess who they thought they were. And it was hard to guess them a lot of times. And when Mother had company at nights or something like this, we all disappeared. We all had to go to bed. It was time to go to bed, and because they'd talk to grown-ups, and so we'd do that. We'd go to bed, and sometimes we'd get down the stairs and listen to see what was going on. We were curious. Well, my earliest memories of it was just looking for it. My mother worked hard to help prepare the dinners. She was one of them. They'd start a few days ahead of time, and they'd go to the different houses to see if they could donate something. And a lot of them donated chickens, so they had to dress the chickens, get them all ready and everything. They made their own pasta. One year, when they first started, they didn't have many people there like they do now. And they even made veal birds. And they get veal, they buy veal and pound it down and fill it with a stuffing and put it together with toothpicks. And that was a lot of work, but you couldn't do it at a place like this. But they had big dinners. There was spaghetti and meatballs and there's veal birds and vegetable and salad and hot rolls. And it was a job. We would have to help serve later on. There wasn't that many people then, and later on we'd have to at festival we'd have to help serve. And they always had music there too. And of course we couldn't. I was pretty young, but one night they'd have dances in the school basement. They'd have dances there, and they always. Then later on they were going to have. They had voting for the Queen, and that started that quite a few years before I was old enough. And they got each generation, and my generation, we didn't have any transportation. We didn't have a car or anything, and they asked me if I would run for the Queen, and I said, we'd have no transportation, and no way I can get out and sell my tickets. And if there was an adult to volunteer to take you around, at that time, I was the first generation, I think, myself and two of my classmates. All three of us refused because we didn't have transportation. And then so it was the next generation. And so they had that, and they still continue that to this day. And that's a real nice deal. They crowned the Queen, and it's a big deal for them anymore, and nice. But they skipped my generation because we couldn't have any transportation. That's what we told them. We didn't have any transportation to go sell tickets. And the one that sold the tickets got to be the Queen. So it didn't have anything to do with talent or beauty or anything. The one that sold the most tickets was the Queen, and it still is that way. She'd go up there and she'd give us a quarter a day. We could spend it up there wherever we wanted. If we wanted to spend it all on one thing, it was okay. But if we wanted to buy a nickel ice cream cone and a dime hamburger or anything, or a ride, we could make that quarter go quite a ways. And they had pictures, machine make pictures. Sometimes you wanted to have a picture made, and you spent some of your quarter there. But she'd always give us a quarter. Well, when they'd go around, they'd knock over the toilets. They'd go to people's house and knock over their outside toilets. Everybody had a toilet. And sometimes they get one and bring it up right up in front. And then where the grocery store was, they'd get somebody's toilet and bring it up there, and they'd have to go find it and take it home. But they had fun, and they'd do things like that. And they did dress up and put on a little show. When I was little, come to the house, and of course Mother always had refreshments for them. Oh yes, I remember the baseball games. I remember those very well because I was getting big enough to go to the ball games, and we'd go to the ball games and watch Tontitown. I'd love to watch them play ball, and Mother would always give us a nickel or a dime. We could buy a Coke or a bag of peanuts or something like that. And so we did, and we would go and enjoy the ball game, enjoy the people playing it. Uncle Virgil was my uncle. That's my mother's sister's husband. He was a good ball player, and all the other men we knew was playing ball. So we would go to them as long as they were in Tontitown. If they were moved, of course, we didn't get to go. And you meet a lot of people there too, kids my age. And boys of our ages, you meet a lot of them there. Well, I would tell them it's more like a big family. Everybody knew everybody. And they all ate about the same food. We always had plenty of pasta, and Mother would fix it and cook it in different ways. She'd make soup, and she'd always cut it in squares. They rolled it out, big rolls, and they call it a miskala, but it's a roller pin of some kind about that long. And she'd roll it out, and then she'd flour it and roll it up and cut it that way. She could cut pretty fast. And then she'd cut them sometimes in different squares. But everybody, like I said, it was kind of like a big family. If anybody was sick, well, we all knew it. And if somebody died, well, they tolled the bells. There'd be so many, Mr. Millar would do that. He told about and I might have already told about him, told them so many for a man and so many for a woman. And, anyhow, the people were all friendly. They were all friendly, and they're all probably in the same boat. There were some of them probably a little bit more financially able because they had maybe bigger farms and things like that. And some of them went to Missouri to work in Oklahoma to work in the mines, the coal mines. I know my uncle did. He was married to my aunt, Uncle Risti, we called him, Sabatini. He worked in the mines. He'd come in on weekends and things like that. And some others did too, but I don't remember who they were. But they'd work in the coal mines and make some money for the family. And like I said, we farmed, but my daddy farmed big. He had two farms that he took care of, the one south and the one north, planting big stuff.
If someone asked you to finish this sentence, how would you say this sentence?
If somebody what?
How would you say this sentence? My favorite thing about Tontitown is...
Well, I guess knowing each other and helping each other. And they were very good at that. If somebody was sick or something like that, everybody knew it, and they'd always sympathize with you. They'd help pray for you, and stuff like this. And our church was... our main entertainment actually was church related, because one thing, like I said, they had activities that to raise money. The women would get together and have bingo parties and pie parties. They'd sell pies. They have sometimes they'd have what do you call it? People bake pies and people would buy them. And have somebody calling them out, and they'd buy the pies for them whole. But they always had things like that. And they also had women to make cocoa sometimes during the winter time for the people. And if you went to communion, you don't eat till after breakfast. So they would have make cocoa. They'd bring their own milk, and they'd make cocoa and have some kind of refreshment, some kind of a bread or something like that to eat, or you could take your own. And most people took something to eat, but they furnished the hot chocolate. That's what they made. They made the hot chocolate. They furnished that. People would bring the milk up there, and they'd serve that to the school kids that went to communion and needed to eat some breakfast. And the different women took turns doing that, going up there and fixing the drink, the hot cocoa. And it was good. We liked it. I got a lot of people going to communion too. They got to get breakfast. It was a good place to live, and actually, and everybody, like I said, everybody knew everybody. They knew the children. We knew everybody when they went to school, and the adults would get together and talk. They'd talk Italian when they didn't want us to know what they were talking about, and they'd really chatter. So it was our disappointment there that we didn't learn Italian, and at home. Mother, I knew a few words, you know a few words when she told us to get out of her way, or if she wanted us to go to the basement, and we kept our canned goods in the basement. She'd can, oh my land, she canned vegetables and fruits and everything in the world, and butcher time, they'd butcher, and what we would do, we'd make sausage. We called it salami. We'd make sausage, and a whole pig or two. And even the hams. The bacons didn't go. The bacons would, because it's too much fat. You didn't want that fat in the sausage. And they'd get casings and put them in casings and tie them in. Our basement was concrete floor. And if it wasn't damp, they'd have to throw water on the floor because it had to mold on the outside to cure. That's how they cured them. And for the bacons and other stuff, they rendered the lard and kept the lard. We always had hog lard. And then what was the bacons, they grind them up and they called it something else. And Mother would use that for seasoning. They'd salt it down. And when she cooked pastas or make a seasoning of any kind, she could use that bacon that was chopped up. We ground it up. It was ground up big. So there was some meat in it too. And she used that, and she used and Mother was a good baker. On Sundays we always had usually pie, and she'd make, believe it or not, she'd give us a quarter pie. They weren't very big, but she'd make so many pies. There was 9 of us, and 10. So she'd make enough pies to give us that much. Our cake, she made cake. We never made a pie, but she let us make cakes and cookies. we'd make those. But the pie she always made, her crust was made out of this hog lard, and it made the best crust you ever saw. In fact, people still buys it for crust. I buy shortening, and I make a lot at a time, like a 3 pounds of shortening at a time. So that makes a lot of crust. It's the recipe I use. That's a lot of crust. It makes about 19 rope balls, and I freeze them. I double wrap them, and then I put about 9 in a package, in these plastic bags. And I put about 9 in there, and if you bake a single one, you could take out 1 ball. And of course, it was so sharp that it was so rich that it didn't take long to thaw. And like I said, I've gave that recipe to several people. And I was telling one person, I said, boy, this pie was so good, that crust was just delicious. This was a friend of ours. We got together, we had a group of 6 couples. We'd get together, and whoever's house you went to, they served refreshments. And this one was serving pie. And I told her, I said, your crust is so good. She said, well, Pat, that's your recipe. I said, well, it belongs to my sister. But we never went hungry. We always had plenty of food to eat and good food. Birthdays, we always got a birthday cake. Mother baked us a birthday cake, our birthdays. We didn't get big parties and things like this they have now, but she made us a cake. So that went to a lot of trouble too. Christmas time, we got 1 gift, and she always bought nuts and oranges and grapefruits and stuff like that. Always had that. Christmas candy, we always had that. We had our baskets out. Easter time, she'd buy Easter candy, and she'd put them in the things in the baskets of ours. Make them. During Lent, we saved candy. We didn't eat candy during Lent. We'd save it and put it in a anybody gave us candy. It was our deal. I mean, our own personal sacrifice that we made. What are you going to give up for Lent this year? And so my mother told him one time, Father talked about Lent, and she says, yes, Father, she says, I do fast during Lent. She says, I make my homemade bread all the time. And she said, instead of cutting it thin, I cut it a little bit bigger, she said, for my breakfast. And of course, Mother, working the way she did, she really didn't have to fast or anything like that. She did enough fasting. But anyway, she cut it a little thicker.